Welcome back to Kawartha Backyard Farms, all you gorgeous garden gnomes. Today's video is going to be about our compost system, how we process it, and how we are screening it as our season continues. We are now getting a lot more material off of the crops. So those green tops off of our potatoes that I just put in there all go right into our compost. As we are pruning the tomatoes, same thing. Those suckers and the green leaves are coming off and going right into our compost. So as we're harvesting things, a lot more is going into our compost, which means that we have to do a little bit more work to turn it over, and we also have to clear out the end bay to make room for more compost. So we use kind of a 3-bay modified system for our compost. We do hot compost and we try our best to get it up to a fairly hot temperature to kill off any weed seeds, primarily because we compost everything, so weed seeds end up in our compost as well, but also harmful bacteria or parasites and other microbes that are going to cause disease or may cause disease in future plants. We try to get the compost hot to kill off those as well. So the first bay here is our, well, main loading bay, you could say, where all of our new materials go in. So that is the green tops off of the plants. We use leaves, dried up leaves in the fall. We'll use wood chips, maybe some straw as well as our brown material that's going to supply carbon, and everything else, kitchen scraps, coffee grinds. We get a lot of coffee grinds from some local businesses, and those are great sources of nitrogen, which the compost needs. And those microbes that are in the compost doing all the work breaking down the material need a ratio of about 30:1 carbon to nitrogen. Now, that is the scientific requirement for the composting, for hot composting. If you're building a compost pile in your backyard, you're probably not weighing out all of the ingredients that are going into it, and therefore calculating the ratio for 30:1 carbon and nitrogen. So a good general rule is about 1:1 ratio of brown materials, so that's your wood chips, dry leaves, and straw, and then the green material, it has your nitrogen, which are the fresh leaves, any cuttings off of plants that you're growing in your gardens, and kitchen scraps. Again, coffee grounds are a really great source of nitrogen and will help to heat up your pile as well. The second bay is kind of our mid-stage. Once the first bay is full and gets heated up quite a bit, we try to aim between 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is in Celsius. It'll be up on the screen there. Once the temperature in our first bay gets up that hot, it'll stay there for a few days. We'll do one turn in the first bay, so we pull everything out, get it mixed up, and then we put it all back into the first bay. So that's about 1 week after initially building the pile, and then after another week we will flip that first bay into the second bay, where it'll sit a little bit longer. The second bay also will heat up. We'll add in some more moisture, but we won't add any more material from the garden or any brown materials either. Once that breaks down over a few weeks, we'll then flip it again and put it back into that same bay. Again, a couple more weeks there breaking down, and then we'll finally flip it into the last bay, adding a little bit of moisture if needed. But in the last bay there, that is where everything will kind of mature and settle down and then become closer to our final product that we're going to use in the garden. So looking at the product of our third bay for our compost system, you might be thinking that there's a lot of material there that isn't fully broken down. We've used quite a bit of larger sticks that didn't break down quite as fast, and maybe there's still some leaves or other items that didn't break down to a finished compost product just yet. But that is where this sifting station comes into play. So we've used a screen before for sifting our compost, and it worked fine, but you needed preferably two people to hold on to it and shake it, and then another person to load compost into it while you're shaking it. Now, this system here is a little bit better because one person can load up the compost and shake it, and it's a little bit more ergonomic, maybe to say. It's easier for sure on the body. It's not as strenuous. So supporting our sifting tray, we have these two sawhorses that I built out of 2x4s, and I cut pieces to 32 inches long, and so there are 7 pieces per sawhorse. And then what you do first is make this I-beam sort of thing. So you have one piece, 132-inch piece there, and then you make a T, and then you add another one to make an I. And then for the legs, you just literally screw them in to the side on either end. And of course do it on both sides, and then they'll actually stand up. And then to top them off, we had some skids that were used to hold PVC pipes together. So they had this metal band that ran down this track that they had cut into these pieces of wood. If you didn't have any of these pieces that were already cut from a skid or something like that, then you could run a 2x4 down a table saw and cut out a groove for this to roll on. Then our sifting tray is a frame of just 2x4 reclaimed lumber from some pallets that were broken down. And then we have, I believe this is half-inch hardware cloth for the screen. And then we also did a frame kind of underneath it to hold that screen in. I found with our previous screen that we had, without this added support, even though this is stapled on, without the added support of the wood underneath it, then these screens tend to pull out of the main frame. And then underneath here we have 4 casters or wheels that will fit. And then because they're kept in those tracks, it's nice and easy to roll them back and forth, screening out this larger material that isn't broken down yet. So I read and hear all the time from people, read on different gardening groups on social media, Facebook, Instagram, about how to inoculate your compost when you're starting a pile with bacteria that's going to help it break down. And you don't need to do this. You do not need to inoculate your composting materials when you're building your pile. It's just simply not necessary. Even those compost accelerators that you could purchase at a hardware store or a garden center, it's not necessary. All of the plants, the plant matter, the leaves on living plants, the leaves on dead or dried up plant or leaves that are falling in the fall, all the wood chips, the straw, all the organic matter that's coming out of our gardens has bacteria and fungi and all those other microbes already on them. You don't have to inoculate your composting material. However, that being said, if you do feel like you need to add something to your compost pile, you can sift out all those materials that didn't fully break down in your compost and then add them to your new piles, and that's going to quote unquote inoculate your new pile with the bacteria that's going to break it down a little bit faster. Of course, a valid point that people will make in gardening social media groups is that sifting your compost is a complete and utter waste of time, and if you have a finished product, you don't have to bother sifting your compost. Now, this is true. You could just take your finished product and put it into your gardens and grow in that. But if you have, like us, a lot of woody material that hasn't broken down yet but is covered in those beneficial bacteria, you might as well sift them out and use them to quote unquote inoculate your new piles. The other thing is, if you are going to be direct seeding with a seeder, running a garden seeder or seed drill through compost that has a lot of bulky, blocky, hard material is a pain in the butt. It doesn't run through very well. Sometimes sticks can get caught in your wheel or in the belt that's driving the seed wheel, and it can just cause the planting process to take a little bit longer. So sifting out all that bulky material and getting a kind of finer product will make that process a little bit easier. Another reason that you may want to sift out your compost is if you are like us and you compost everything and all things. Basically, there's going to be some other kinds of debris that ends up in your almost finished product. For example, we collect compost from a variety of different sources, materials from restaurants and from coffee houses and from other local residents, which sometimes ends up meaning that we get plastics or other inorganic material in our compost piles, and we don't want those to be in our growing beds, so sifting them out is a fast way to get them out and sort them from the rest of the material.